Following on from yesterday, where we concluded that there is joy in heaven when lost people are reconciled to God, and that our joy in God is sustained by the sure hope that we will be with Him for all eternity in heaven, we focus our attention on redemption itself. Before we look at two key scriptures on this matter, we need to understand where redemption fits in the whole plan of God. As I pointed out in day 2, we saw that God had a plan before creation had begun, which means that everything from God speaking creation into being is all part of God's sovereign plan. Therefore, it should be no surprise that redemption is first seen in Genesis chapter 3, just after Adam and Eve had sinned. This was of no surprise to God. He did not have to come up with another plan, like a football manager after his team concedes after the first 5 minutes. God only has plan A. Job realizes this when he says, "I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted." Job 42:2. So let's draw a few things out of the first few chapters of Genesis. We see two accounts of God making mankind. In chapter 1 we see that man was made in the image of God, and that He made them male and female, Genesis 1:26 and 27. We then see that God gives dominion over the vegetation and animals to man, Genesis 1:28 to 31. In the second account, we learn that God made Adam first out of the soil, Genesis 2:7, then made Eve from Adam, Genesis 2:21 and 22. And finally, we see God giving one restriction to man's dominion. They can eat of all the other trees, but not the tree of the knowledge of good and of evil, Genesis 2:16 and 17. It is interesting here to note that God says, "For when you eat from it, you will certainly die." Or some of your translations might say, "in that day," in Genesis 2:17. God knew it was going to happen. It was part of God's plan. He knew because He created man and created man in His image. There is something about us that is like God. An image of something is to reflect the original image. When you look at a picture on the phone or on a photograph, if you're old school, it is not like looking at the real person, but it is an image of the real person, a projection of them. You look and know who it is and remember what was happening when the image was taken. At times, you can even draw a conclusion what the person's emotions were. Now, God is free. Remember, He does what He pleases. We too reflect that image. We have free will. We can choose to stand or sit. Even though God knows what we will choose and do at any moment, He does not control us. This is why every person is accountable before God for their actions. So, when God commands Adam not to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, it seems He did not want man to have this knowledge. Why would that be? Even as I have suggested this to you, your mind is probably thinking, why would God not want us to know this? Or wouldn't it make sense for man to know what is good and what is evil? Well, that is the point. That's exactly how Eve thought after she was tempted by Satan. We have to remember that Satan deals in part truths. That gets our attention and gets our brains working, but it's the missing parts or the lies we need to watch out for. Here, Satan speaks two truths. The first, although true, hides the understanding of the consequence, and the second brings about the temptation in Eve. The first truth, or part truth, is that Adam and Eve would not physically die. the moment they eat the fruit. There would be a death, but it was a death to God. All men fall short of the glory of God because the first Adam and Eve's relationship with God and the rest of creation was different. This is lost state we were looking at yesterday, and the lost state or death would last for all eternity. It goes beyond natural death. The second truth sparked temptation. When Eve reasoned that the fruit was good and pleasing to the eye, in Genesis 3:6, she saw no reason to her understanding. Remember, she does not have the knowledge of good and evil yet, why she would die after eating it. Then she is tempted by having a desire to have wisdom of good and evil, Genesis 3:6. This is directly related to Satan's truth that they would be like God, and God knows this. Let me connect these points. God has commanded Adam not to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and of evil, because you will surely die. So Adam, and then Eve, only know this because God provided them with that wisdom. They happily obeyed up until the point they were tempted. Later, after God has spoken to Adam and Eve, he says, "The man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil." Genesis 3:22. By eating from the knowledge of good and evil, man is no longer reliant on God for this, but has become self-reliant. It is because of this reason God removed Adam and Eve from the garden, so that they could not live forever by eating the fruit of the tree of life. Genesis 22 and 24 of chapter 3. Now, there is one final issue to draw out here before we move on. It is the word desire. Eve desired to have the wisdom of good and evil and be like God. Satan offered something that Eve desired it more than what was originally on offer. In the book of James, he spells out to the readers that we are led away by our own evil desires. They are not evil because they are of Satan. They are not evil because it leads to murder or something abhorrent. No, they are evil because we desire something else other than God. So how does desire link with the theme of joy? Well, we only desire what we enjoy. If you genuinely desire something and do anything to fulfill that desire, like pay money or book time off work or cancel a prior engagement, then it is not because you hate doing it. You will do all that and justify all that because the desire is fueled by the joy that it brings you. Genuine joy engages genuine desire. That is the point, I think, of the fall. And this follows the pattern before creation also. Remember, Satan and the other angels had fallen prior to the first human fall. Jude 1-6 and 2 Peter 2:4. So, when God later pronounces to love him with all our being, to have no other gods beside him, and to love him more than father, mother, and children, we need to rewind back to the first command to Adam and Eve. It is as if God is saying, I have created this universe to show my worth, my beauty, and power. And I have created you in my image to reflect my image back to me for my glory and pleasure. I have chosen you above all creation as my prized possession because I want to show you my worth, my beauty, and my power, not just through the universe, but also to you personally. So let me be your God. rely on me, depend on me, because I am. And any love, joy, peace, justice, pleasure, and worth comes from me. Now, in Genesis 4, we see God addressing each of the guilty parties. When God confronts the serpent, he speaks forth his plan to deal with this tempter and the lostness between God and man as a result. He said, "And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel." Genesis 3:15. So, God is going to bring a child out of the woman that will wage war against Satan, the tempter. Although Satan will strike his heel, which we assume was the cross, this child will crush Satan's head. This child was Jesus Christ. So now that we have established the principle and foundation of the plan of redemption, tomorrow we're going to continue and see where joy comes into it.